We have a guest speaker today. Before he comes, I'm going to read from Mark chapter 10, verses 46 through to 52. Then they came to Jericho. As Jesus and his disciples, together with a large crowd, were leaving the city, a blind man, Bartimaeus, which means son of Timaeus, was sitting by the roadside begging. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." Many rebuked him and told him to be quiet, but he shouted all the more, "Son of David, have mercy on me." Jesus stopped and said, "Call him." So they called to the blind man, "Cheer up, on your feet, he's calling you." Throwing his cloak aside, he jumped to his feet and came to Jesus. "What do you want me to do for you?" Jesus asked him. The blind man said, "Rabbi, I want to see." "Go," said Jesus, "your faith has healed you." Immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus along the road. I'd like to welcome up Bruce. Bruce is joining us from the Christian Blind Mission. And we'll just pray for you, Bruce, before you start. Lord, we give you thanks for what you have placed in Bruce, for him to lead this ministry, for him to be able to share with us this morning. And I pray for faith, Lord, that we will see what it is you want us to see. We thank you.
Well, thank you. It's great to be able to come and share today. And I've had quite a long connection with this church, even though many of you probably haven't seen me before. And also with your minister, Ken, and also in his previous life when he was a minister in St Ninian's in Blenheim a long time ago, before he went to Vanuatu. But it's great to be here today. So, Bruce Morris is my name. I live in Rangiora, just north of Christchurch, with my wife Christine and three children who are fast growing up, 18, 21 and 22. Two of them have been away studying and have come back now as they look for work. So instead of being home alone or an empty nest this year, we've got 5 of us plus 2 cats. But I guess that goes with the territory, doesn't it? Anyway, so it's great to be able to come and share today. I work for Christian Blind Mission full time. We have an office in Auckland, so I'll share a bit about that a little bit later. And just the difference that Christian Blind Mission does to those who live in poverty but who have a disability as well. That's the different edge to what we do. And I've worked with them for nearly 5 years. Prior to that, I worked for another Christian agency working with people in poverty as well for 21 years. So I've spent more than half my working life, I guess, encouraging, helping others to make a difference to those who we're called to help out. But first I want to take you on a little bit of a different journey, and which will tie in along with the message of hope and just how important hope is to each of us. So how many of you here have been to see this film when it was around recently? Nobody? One person, okay. Give this man a chocolate at the end. Okay. Well, I'm going to take a little bit of a journey today. As well as having a passion to help people make a difference to those in need, I also have a passion for the Antarctic, because in the 80s I got to go there twice when they were rebuilding Scott Base, and I worked for Ministry of Works. Some of you not so younger folk will remember that name. We didn't all lean on shovels when you were driving past in your car. Some of us did other things. And I was involved in the rebuilding of Scott Base when it was built, when it was replacing what Eben Hillary had built in 1957 when he went down there, driving tractors, and some of you might have read that story or heard all about that. Anyway, so when I was there, obviously this is Scott Base on the corner on what's called Pram Point on Ross Island. McMurdo Station is about 3 kilometres away. You can walk there if you like, or you can get your little shuttle bus. And the first time I was there, it's a bit hard to tell, but there was huskies as well, which was kind of fun. So you got to experience being pulled along on a sled by huskies. So much more fun than a motor skidoo. Anyway, but while I was there, it gave me a chance to learn a little bit about explorers, and you could go to visit Scott's hut at McMurdo that he built in 1902. And also, on Sundays on your day off, they'd often take you somewhere, and we went to go to Cape Evans, and we saw Scott's hut over there as well, along with all the tins of supplies and things that they left behind. When I got married, I was not really a big reader, but I married this lady who was, or this girl who was who loved books and came with a library, and it didn't take her long to work out that if she bought me a book on Antarctica, it would be read more than once, and didn't really matter what the book was about. So that was kind of good. So yeah, I have been reading more books along the way, but it's taught me a little bit more about the explorers and what life was like for them, and just the hope that they had, I guess, and what they were doing, and just the challenges around that. So today I'm going to share a little bit about Sir Ernest Shackleton, and the hope that he inspired of those men that he took south, and what we can learn from that as well around hope. So in 1914, the South Pole had already been conquered by Amundsen and Robert Falcon Scott. Ernest Shackleton had a go in 1907 and had got within 97 miles of the pole and then turned around. He realised that if they continued, they were going to die. So he turned around and they all made it back home safely. And a quote he said to his wife was, "I'd rather come home a lame donkey than a dead lion." So and he was actually knighted for being the first man to get so close to the pole. So that was how he became Sir Ernest Shackleton. A bit of trivia for you. But then he was still keen to explore. He'd been to the Arctic, and he realised nobody had gone from one side of the Antarctic to the other through the South Pole. So that was going to be his journey. That was going to be what he wanted to do. So what do? You need a boat, you need a few men, and you need a bit of money. So what do? You put an advert in the paper, don't you? Can you all read that? Shall I read it out? You fellas at the back. Men wanted for hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful. Honour and recognition, though, in the event of success. Contact me, Ernest Shackleton. So, of course, people were queuing up, weren't they? Well, so the ad doesn't offer much hope, but he had hope in himself. He'd been to the Antarctic, he'd been to the Arctic. People knew who he was, even back in those days. And believe it or not, 5,000 people applied for 27 positions on this ship. So he managed it somehow, he screened them all, and he got down to the 27 men that were going to go with him. So, in August 1914, off he set off to South Georgia in the Endurance. And 2.5 months later, they arrived there as their last port of call before they headed to the Antarctic. So then they headed off again for 3 months, going south, dodging icebergs, and eventually they got trapped in the ice. They got stuck 60 miles from where they really wanted to be. So he realised actually, okay, we're going to be here now for the summer, or through the winter, until the next summer when hopefully the boat will be freed, and off they'll go again. So here they are. This is them stuck in the ice. So it's quite a bright photograph, but of course it's all very well, and you've got 24 hours of sunlight. But as time goes on, you finish up with 24 hours of darkness. So he realised he had to keep their motivations up, so playing cards, dog races on the ice, football on the ice, going out hunting for seals to get fresh meat to avoid scurvy, all of that sort of thing. So over those 9 months until the summer came around, the ship actually drifted 1,300 miles, which is quite amazing, isn't it? You'd think you wouldn't go anywhere stuck in the ice, but actually the whole lot was moving. Anyway, the top slide is the midwinter dinner, when it's pitch dark and they're celebrating the middle of winter, and as the sun starts to rise again from there. Well, the summer came around, and what happened was the ship didn't get freed. It just got crushed further. And then Shackleton realised, gosh, my job, we're not going to get to where we want to go. We're not going to go across through the South Pole. I'm going to have to get these men home. Failure really wasn't an option. So they get the 3 lifeboats off the Endurance. They gather all the food they can, and for 5 months they drag these boats day after day to get to the open sea. So just imagine, that's a motivation thing, isn't it? What are you going to do today, boys? We're going to get out and drag the boats another 2 miles, or whatever it takes. You can do the sums, 300 miles, 5 months. Each day was not very far, and it would not be nice and flat. It would be lumpy and all sorts of things. But hey, they got there, and then so they had a bit of a rest, and then the 28 men got into 3 boats, and off they went, and they did get to Elephant Island. Not a particularly great place to be. It was rocky, the cliffs down to the bottom, but they stayed there for a week, and then they turned a couple of boats upside down to give them a bit of a roof, and then Shackleton worked out, okay, we now need to get back to South Georgia, and this next stage of the journey became the greatest journey in the world. It's often been reported and quoted for that. And so he left 22 men behind and took 5. So 6 of them left in one boat, which they'd put a cover on it, put some sails onto it. So he had to think about the people left behind, so he picked 2 people who he sensed were going to cause problems to those left behind. So he chose them as part of his group of 6 to take away, so that would relieve some of the pressure left behind and give them a better chance of surviving. And then, of course, those tough ones were going to be stuck in the boat with him, nowhere to go, for however long it took. Anyway, it took 16 days to get themselves to South Georgia through these horrible seas. There was a gale every day of that journey until the last day when they arrived in the dark to South Georgia. They only got a couple of sightings of the sun to work out where they're going. Frank Worsley from Akaroa in Christchurch was the navigator. He only got a couple of sightings and some dead reckoning. They did get to where they wanted to go. But when they arrived, there was the storm of all storms, and they thought they weren't going to actually make it. But they did, eventually. It took them half a dozen goes to get in down this narrow passage into the island, and they arrived on the wrong side of the island, because that was just where they were. And then, so this is the men waving goodbye on Elephant Island. So they arrived on this wrong side of South Georgia. Again, rested for a week. This is them arriving. So they took an ice axe, food for 3 days, a rope, and off they headed across the island. Nobody had ever been there before. No trails were there. They had to find their own way across that island, and they didn't stop for 36 hours. They just had little 5-minute breaks, and that was it, because Shackleton realised if they stopped and fall asleep, they were going to die. They were never going to wake up again. So they just kept on going. And then eventually they arrived after going down some glaciers and then back up again because it was the wrong way and things. And when they arrived, he says, "Our beards were long and our hair was matted. We were unwashed, and the garments we'd worn for nearly a year without changing them were pretty tattered, stained, and you can imagine what they probably smelt like." So the Norwegian whalers at South Georgia gave them a bath, fed them, and then eventually they came around and picked up their 3 mates they left behind on the other side of the island. The story continues that Shackleton then arranged for getting the fellas back from Elephant Island, which took 4 attempts, 2 from South Georgia, 1 from the Falkland Islands, and 1 from Buenos Aires, the South America there, to get them back. And eventually they got back to Elephant Island. When he left, he said to the boys there, "Well, I'll be back in 4 weeks, It was actually 4 months. And Frank Wild, the guy who was looking after these men on Elephant Island, when the weather was good and the sea was calm, each morning when he'd get up, he would roll his sleeping bag up in the hope that the boys were going to come back and pick him up that morning. And that was how he kept motivating the people on that island, keeping their hopes up. So was Shackleton religious? Never really thought about it, probably, eh? He was brought up as a Quaker. I'm just going to read a little quote out of this book here. Among the mountains of South Georgia, all 3 men firmly believed that there was another one walked alongside them, something which they all directly, obviously derived lots of strength, courage and hope from. But Shackleton writes, he says, "When I look back at those days, I have no doubt that Providence guided us, not only across those snowfields, but across the storm-white sea that separated Elephant Island from our landing place on South Georgia. I know during that long and racking march of 36 hours over unnamed mountains and glaciers of South Georgia, it seemed to me often that we were 4, not 3. The extra person experience is now quite well documented, but back then in 1916, it was not known. Nobody talked about it. Like Shackleton, we too can place our hope and trust in the same God that watches over us, guides us and cares for us. The same God that's in the business of bringing hope to those in need, the widows, the orphans, the least of these. The ones Jesus often met, wasn't it, on the fringe of society. He would go and talk to these people, and all his, the other friends would be horrified. Why are you talking to them? Why are you associating with those people? But that's what he did, wasn't it? So how does God want us to bring hope to those people in need? Well, we are his feet and hands to carry out this work. We are the ones he's tasked with this job to do. So all of those men got back to the UK in the end. 27 months after leaving, nobody died. They were all, we wouldn't say they're all fit and well, but they were all certainly alive and not too bad. So quite an achievement for Shackleton and the hope he instilled in those. And somebody also said, if for the navigation skills of Worsley, if it wasn't for his skills, they would never have found land. And if Shackleton had not motivated and kept their hopes up, they wouldn't have been alive to see it. So anyway, let us just reflect on the reading today. So here we've got blind Bartimaeus on the side of this road the week before Easter. He didn't have much hope. He was cast out of the city, beyond the city gates. Nobody wanted to know him. Nobody liked him. But he'd got himself to that road on the week before Easter. He knew people are going to go along, so hopefully he would be given something, some food, some money. But he was going to probably be kicked and poked as well, because that's what happens. And then he called out. And probably before that, the crowd would probably be taking them, Jesus along and away from Bartimaeus. But he called out and specifically said, Rabbi, Rabbi. And then Jesus said, caught his attention. What does he want? I want to be healed, said Bartimaeus. So then they brought him over and Jesus healed him, welcomed him into Jesus' kingdom. He wants us all to be the best we can be, renewing his hope. Jesus doesn't always choose the best people to associate with or to be part of, does he? The disciples were an interesting bunch. And then, of course, in Exodus, we've got Moses. Moses said, when God was choosing him to be the great leader and to do all sorts of good things, Moses said, pick anybody else. I can't talk. I'm not very eloquent. I'm not the person you want to speak, for this job. Anybody but me. But he wasn't going to have a bar of it. And we all know how that played out, that Moses turned into be a great leader. And Paul had problems as well. We don't quite know what they were, but Paul had his issues as well. So who is Christian Blind Mission? So this is who we are. We work for an inclusive world which all people with disabilities enjoy their human rights and achieve their full potential. So thank you to those who supported us in the past or been part of CBM when we've been promoted at this church, or you might have been a supporter for quite a while. This is what gets me out of bed in the morning so that we can all make a difference. And like the little video that was shown earlier, and the little twist at the end, and the fact that the girl is deaf. And the boys had to make it so that she could be included in that, so that she could experience all those things. We heard the sounds, but she heard nothing. But she was included, and they wanted her to be part of it. And that's who CBM is. We want people with a disability to be included. So we've been around since 1908, but in New Zealand for the last 31 years. We work in parts of Africa, in Kenya, Uganda, Nepal, and also in Papua New Guinea and in Laos. And we've done a bit of stuff in India as well. So I'll just share a couple of examples of sort of the work that we do as we're giving hope back to those who need it when hope is lost in many cases. So this is Tommy. He lives in Papua New Guinea. He's a musician. He loves to sing and play music, and he's been playing in some clubs and writing songs and all on the radio. He's also a bus driver, and he has a young son. And then at one point, he was getting some cloudiness over his eyes and was having trouble seeing, and he didn't know what was going on. He thought it was witchcraft or sorcery was causing him to go blind. So he went and saw some witch doctors and see if they could heal him. We all, of course, know that wasn't going to go very well. And then eventually he caught up with somebody else who said to him, well, look, a CBM, Christian Blind Mission team is going to come into your town, your village in the island of East New Britain, off to the side of Papua New Guinea. They will inspect your eyes, find out what's going on, and if you need an operation, they can probably provide that. So we did that. Some friends took him along, and it was a cataract. So he had his cataracts replaced, and now he's back singing again, back driving his bus, making money, and so joyful to see his new son. And exciting to be able to do that. And for children as well, giving us to renew hope through restoring sight for people who have lost it and don't realise that it can be replaced. Last month we were helping people who have a disability in Kenya who've been struggling with a drought for quite some time, providing them with ways that they can get access to the food they need. Because often if you have a disability and you haven't got crutches, or you can't see very well, or you don't hear that there's something happening, you need help to get there. So we've been able to do that and provide them with medical needs if they're struggling with malnutrition, provide them some clean water, some food, and making quite a difference. And we've had a great response to that. This little boy called Kyle is 7. He lives in the Philippines. And for him, he loves school, he loves basketball. It was good to see those fellas this morning in their sport and the achievements they've had in their sport. Kyle's passion is basketball. But then one day he started to develop some cloudiness in his eyes, and he couldn't see either. And thought, what's going on here? And he got checked out, and he was developing cataracts. But again, we were able to, through our field workers and partners, give him the operations that he needs. So he's now back doing his basketball, back learning at school, and is pretty excited about all of that. The other area that we work in was doing a livelihood project, or again helping people with a disability to raise their own income. But also this guy here, he lives in some villages in Laos where he's got poor sight in one of his eyes. Perhaps it was a bomb from the Vietnam War. We're not sure. It was like 50 years ago, so maybe it was about that right time when he was a child. So helping people with disabilities in these particular 10 villages to know about their human rights, to be treated fairly from others in the village. And that's been working quite well. The Lao government is all about including people with disabilities, but when you get out into the little remote places, nothing really changes. So we've been helping them out. And so he was learning some agricultural skills along with others, how to grow produce to sell, how to look after animals. And he's been part of a small self-help group, supporting others as well and training them. So he was given these 3 pigs a couple of years ago. Some of you might have bought a goat at Christmas time. If it was a CBM goat, it might have been a pig in his case, because it might be full up with goats. And to help make a difference in some of these people's lives with raising an income. So, exciting to make a difference, and seeing the difference that is helping him to support his family. And his pig pen is above a pond, so any stuff that falls through feeds fish. So he gets a bit of a double whammy of an income from the fish too, and that's kind of cool. So yeah, it's great. So, and we also help women who suffer from fistula, which is a little tear in the birth canal through a traumatic birth in Nigeria, and we've been doing that for a number of years as well. So yeah, it's great to be able to make a difference and just give hope to people who are just struggling and can make such a difference. We take our sight for granted, but if we lose it, all of a sudden we're dependent on somebody else or whatever. And so it's so nice to give people their sight back and help kids with club feet have them be corrected, or women and others with poor hearing. So it's all those are sort of things that we do. And the New Zealand government money gives us money to match what you give sometimes too. So for if you want to give somebody a cataract operation, an adult is $35, but the New Zealand government can give us $140 to add to that. So all of a sudden you're helping 5 people, not 1. So it's great to do that. So so there's opportunity today to catch up with me after the service. Come and see me over a cup of tea. There's a little table there with some bits and pieces on. Come and check it out. But yeah, do consider if you wanted to make a difference in this way. It's easy to do that and make quite a difference. And we can't do it on our own, but we can achieve so much with people like yourselves who want to partner with us and live out their faith and make a huge difference. So it's been good to come and share some good stories today. Take you on a different journey. I think you probably weren't expecting to go to the Antarctic this morning when you woke up and took the ice off your car. But hey, just the hope that some of those explorers had, and that Shackleton had, and the fact that there was this 4th person with them on that journey, the same God that guides us and helps us and leads us and has a place for us. We all know the verse from Jeremiah 29. I'm not going to recite it, but there's a place for all of us, a destination for all of us, and He knows what we're to do, where we're to go. So thank you for the opportunity to come this morning and share something a little different with you. I hope you found that interesting, and maybe if you hadn't seen the movie or you haven't read the book, maybe you could might be interested to do that as well. But anyway, I think I'll hand it back now to we've got another song. So thank you.
Let's stand together and sing our final song.